Terence Crawford too big, too strong for Errol Spence Jr. And I think that was a surprise to most people because going into the pre-fight weigh-ins, right, Crawford was always a smaller guy, but once they rehydrated and got into the ring, Crawford was way bigger, much bigger head, broader shoulders, bigger hands, wider feet, right? And you can tell that by the shoes. To the point where it's kind of ironic where Errol Spence thought he was the bigger guy and he was going to just go in there and accumulate punishment on Crawford, which he tried to do. But as soon as he landed the first few punches, it really didn't do anything to Crawford. And you can see it in Crawford's face that he wasn't fazed by any of it. Right? And so basically, that was kind of like, ironic, right? Because Errol Spence was saying that he was too small and all of this. And everybody, when they were talking about Crawford, was saying how he used to fight at 135 when most people in the boxing, in the know, knew that he's like the size of a middleweight, right? And it showed. And I think, right, again, most people didn't what's the term, like, underestimated his size, right? To the point where, again, Errol Spence was looking good. Well, wasn't looking good, but he looked better on the heavy bag than Crawford pre-fight weigh-ins, right? So each one of his punches were harder than Crawford's, but again, size, in my opinion, did play a major factor to the point where, again, like, he could not accumulate any damage on Terence Crawford. Now, Crawford did do a good job of putting his hands on his chin to block the jab and rolling and all the other stuff, using the shell, using the cross guard, using the, just the regular standard guard, and just picking off Spence. And Spence's feet were just so erratic. You could see that he was trying to drill. He was trying to put into motion some of the things that he drilled, and Crawford just had all the answers to it, right? And it was just a one-sided drumming, in the words of Showtime. Now, a lot of this could be kind of like predetermined from watching Frank Martin fight, what was his name? Artem something, where Artem practically won 10 out of the 12 rounds, according to many people, before, getting dropped in the 11th and 12th and then losing the fight by split decision, right? We're talking about Artem. But Frank Martin was getting outboxed, and it kind of goes into the training habits of someone like a Derrick James who does a lot of drills, and you see them fight a lot of the same ways that Derrick James used to fight when he was younger. And again, it just didn't work against Crawford. And again, I would say a combination of bad game planning, size underestimation, and, like, the overall energy of it was that Spence was walking into a chopping block because he was this protected Hypejob who didn't really beat anybody going back to 2018, right? Everybody was laying down for him, is what it seemed like. It wasn't like he was actually winning. It was more like his opponents were either throwing the fight or doing something funny where they weren't fighting as themselves. And again, some people would say that it was Spence's skills, right? Skills pay the bills and all this other stuff, but we actually just saw that he just got exposed for being, a C-level Hypejob who ducked, like a Manny Pacquiao for a good reason, right? And again, I believe I picked Spence, right? Because he was the bigger guy. I thought his punches would hurt Crawford, but Crawford was the heavy favorite, even though all the odds were against him. The ref, the judges, the establishment was against Crawford because they had spent so much stock and and money into building up Spence that they couldn't just they couldn't just cash him out. And so again, a lot of him was just pure hype job. Pure hype job, as what was it? What's that guy? Chris Algieri's trainer said, pure hype job, right? And basically that came true. So even going in before, and most people would say that these guys were two A-level fighters or whatnot. I didn't classify them as that. I didn't believe that either guy was going to be elevated should one win or lose. Now, even though Terence Crawford did destroy Errol Spence, I wouldn't put him at like this level above him, even though the weight class is completely depleted, right? And so, again, Terence Crawford was huge. He was huge. It was weird, man. It was like a what do you call it? Like a reverse mirror or something like that. And basically, none of the punches. A lot of the punches were able to rock Crawford, but it didn't really accumulate, right? And yeah, and all the accumulation was done on Spence. And, man, he got beat up. He got beat up. It was a great joy to watch. And, good luck to Terence Crawford. Or, congratulations to Terence Crawford for, doing what he was supposed to do. Even though, like, all the odds, I was surprised at Terence Crawford, right? I thought it was going to be a 50-50 fight, but it wasn't. So, does it merit a rematch? No. No, it doesn't. Spence, I thought, again, when we talk about game planning, I thought Spence was going to sit in the middle, make Crawford try to come to him, right? But instead, he tried to chase Crawford down and just got picked apart. And it was just terrible, terrible game planning. One, because all film study would suggest that Crawford isn't good going forward, that even when it was time to finish off Spence and Crawford had to move forward, he wasn't able to do anything, right? It was when Spence decided to try and win the fight that he got stopped by going forward, right? But if he had, I'm not going to say if he had this or that, right? But again, the game plan was terrible. I thought he was going to do a lot better by standing in the middle and then duking it out toe-to-toe. But instead, all he did was just follow Crawford, right? And it was kind of really indicative of the Frank Martin fight. And it was just very, it's almost like predictive programming, but not predictive programming. So there you go. Nothing surprises me, I guess. Besides the size, right? But again, like everybody said, Errol Spence was this protected hype job. He was manufactured. None of his opponents actually came in to actually try to win. And the one guy who did try to come to win, Manny Pacquiao, both guys, Crawford and Spence, decided to step away from that fight. And it was just not, in my opinion, not the biggest fight in boxing. Actually kind of boring, in my opinion. But, I mean, I know a lot of people were excited because that whole energy was like Errol Spence was just going in to get slaughtered. And, that even though I believed that it was going to be closer, it wasn't. I mean, if you counted the punches, if you had to count the punches, I think Errol Spence was winning, but, like, he wasn't doing any real damage, right? And so, again, I think Crawford just too big, too strong, and that was basically it. Like, he's huge for the weight class. Especially if Errol Spence is huge, and then Crawford was even bigger than Spence. Which, I mean, wow. But great outcome. Most people would say Errol Spence was exposed, but he wasn't really exposed because most people saw what he actually really was. And most people were thinking the same with Crawford. And it was just, man, if people thought both of these guys were A level, and I personally thought they were B level, then that makes Errol Spence like a D level fighter. Which, I mean, man. All right, well, I'm kind of lost for words. Not lost for words. It's just I can't think of anything to say other than, just the size of Crawford. It was just, it looked like he was just in there and he was getting wailed on, and it just wasn't doing shit to him. And it was just, I was just like, oh, Spence is going to get knocked out. He's going to get knocked out because his punches aren't doing any damage. And it was very obvious from, I think, in my opinion, I think Spence won round 1 and round 3 on just landed punches. But just looking at those punches, it was like, we're talking about the landed ones. It wasn't doing anything. So, yeah. Thanks for watching.